It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Family had traveled in from different states, the reception hall was draped in roses and soft white candles, and the groom was rehearsing his vows under his breath, his palms sweating from nervous anticipation. Today wasn't just another Saturday, it was the day Claire Matthews, a 26-year-old woman known for her radiant smile and big-hearted kindness, was finally going to marry the man she called her soulmate. But just hours before Claire was meant to walk down the aisle, before she was supposed to meet her groom at the altar, her lifeless body was discovered in her hotel suite. The laughter of bridesmaids, the music playing softly from portable speakers, the champagne chilling on ice, all of it collapsed into horror. Instead of a wedding, there would be an investigation. Instead of vows, there would be silence. And instead of a celebration of love, there would be a single, unanswerable question. Who wanted Claire Matthews dead on the happiest day of her life? If stories of heartbreak, betrayal, and chilling mystery grip you the way they grip us, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today, we're not just talking about a bride, we're unraveling a real-life nightmare, one that forces us to question how well we ever truly know the people closest to us. The bride everyone loved. Claire wasn't just any bride, she was adored by almost everyone who knew her. Raised in a small town in Virginia, she grew up with 3 siblings and was known as the peacekeeper of her family. She studied nursing in college and had a reputation for staying calm under pressure, always putting others before herself. Her fiancé, Jason Harper, had been her steady rock since they met at a college football game 5 years earlier. Friends often said they balanced each other perfectly. She was warm, empathetic, and adventurous, while he was steady, loyal, and protective. Their relationship had faced the usual ups and downs of young adulthood, distance, work stress, financial struggles, but through it all, they had held on to each other. When Jason finally proposed during a snowy winter trip in Colorado, Claire called it the easiest yes of my life. By all appearances, theirs was a love story destined for forever. But what no one knew, what Claire herself may have only discovered in the days leading up to her wedding, was that forever wasn't guaranteed. The night before, the rehearsal dinner had gone beautifully. Laughter filled the room as friends toasted to Claire and Jason's future. Claire's cheeks glowed with happiness, her eyes shining as she clinked glasses with her bridesmaids. Later that evening, she shared a playful video on her Instagram story, her in a silky robe, twirling with a glass of champagne, teasing, "Tomorrow's the big day. Jason, I hope you're ready to cry when you see me in this dress." That was the last time anyone outside her bridal suite saw her alive. According to the plan, Claire would stay at the hotel with her maid of honor, while Jason stayed elsewhere with his groomsmen. The next morning, hair and makeup would begin at 9 a.m., and she'd be ready for the 1 p.m. ceremony. But sometime in those early hours of the morning, everything went terribly wrong. The discovery. At 8:15 a.m., Claire's maid of honor knocked on her suite door. No answer. She tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. Figuring maybe Claire had gone down for coffee, she brushed it off. By 9:30 a.m., the stylists had arrived, and the suite was still locked, still silent. That's when unease turned to fear. Finally, at 10:05 a.m., the hotel manager opened the room with a master key. What they found inside was unforgettable. Claire was lying motionless on the floor, her bridal gown, still neatly bagged, hanging untouched in the closet. Her skin was pale, her lips faintly blue. And the position of her body was chilling. She hadn't collapsed randomly. It looked as though she had been placed there. The room, once filled with flowers and bridal accessories, instantly transformed into a crime scene. Her mother screamed, collapsing against the doorframe. Jason had to be restrained by friends as he shouted her name, desperate for her to wake up. The wedding was called off, not because of cold feet, but because the bride was dead. The questions begin. The immediate question detectives faced was, how did Claire die? And the second question was even darker, who had wanted her gone on the happiest day of her life? The timing wasn't random. Someone had decided Claire would never walk down that aisle. That she would never say her vows. That she would never get her happily ever after. But when investigators began combing the room for evidence, What they found wasn't just tragic, it was sinister. Among her belongings, inside the small bridal bag she had packed with jewelry and makeup, was a velvet pouch. Inside it lay her engagement ring. And with it, a folded note in Claire's handwriting. The words inside that note would shock everyone who loved her. And they would cast suspicion in a direction no one saw coming. The note that changed everything. The velvet pouch was simple, elegant, and easily overlooked. But what was inside it turned Claire's death from a heartbreaking tragedy into a chilling mystery. Her engagement ring, something she never took off, was sealed inside. And next to it, folded neatly, was a handwritten note. The handwriting was unmistakably Claire's. Curved, deliberate strokes, just as she wrote on birthday cards, post-it notes, and the journal she kept faithfully. But what struck detectives most wasn't the familiar writing. It was the words themselves. The note read, "If you're reading this, then something is wrong. The wedding can't happen. He's not who you think he is. Please forgive me." Just 4 sentences. But those 4 sentences detonated like a bomb, shaking everyone who read them. The first suspect. The meaning seemed obvious: he's not who you think he is. Claire was hours away from marrying Jason Harper, the man she had loved for years. If she was warning someone about he, then who else could it mean but him? Jason was pulled aside and questioned immediately. He was pale, shaking, and clearly broken. "No," he repeated, over and over. "No, no, no. She wanted this. We were happy. You don't understand," she was excited. Why would she write that? But as detectives pressed, the situation grew worse for him. Jason was the last person Claire had spoken to the night before. Texts showed a brief exchange around 11:30 p.m., where he had written, "Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow is ours." The note hinted at betrayal or deception, and Jason was the most logical candidate. And then came the autopsy report. Toxicology revealed something chilling: Claire hadn't died from natural causes. She had been poisoned. Someone had slipped a substance into her system that caused her heart to fail silently in the early morning hours. This wasn't fate. This wasn't a tragic accident. Someone had made sure Claire Matthews would never live to see her wedding day. The family shock. Claire's family was devastated. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, asking the same question over and over: "Why today? Why like this?" Her younger sister, Hannah, gave investigators a detail that deepened the mystery. "Claire wasn't herself this past week," Hannah whispered. "She was distracted. Nervous. I asked her if she was okay, and she just said, 'Don't worry. It'll be fine after the wedding.' But the way she said it, it didn't sound fine at all." It was the first clear hint that Claire had been hiding something. Jason under fire. Jason insisted he had nothing to hide. He told detectives their relationship was strong, that Claire hadn't voiced doubts, that she was excited about the wedding. But when police obtained hotel security footage, his story cracked. At 2:41 a.m., just hours before Claire's body was found, Jason was seen on camera leaving the hotel. He wasn't in pajamas. He wore jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. When asked about it, Jason admitted, "I couldn't sleep. I went for a drive. I was nervous. Big day, you know?" But detectives weren't convinced. Why sneak out in the middle of the night instead of telling someone? Why disappear just hours before his fiancée was poisoned? And most importantly, where did he go? The secret she might have known. As investigators pieced together the last week of Claire's life, a disturbing picture began to form. One bridesmaid told police she had overheard Claire crying in the bathroom just 2 nights before the wedding. "I couldn't hear all of it, but she said something like, 'How could you lie to me? After everything?'" Another bridesmaid admitted Claire had confided something vague but haunting: "I'm not sure I know him anymore." Had Claire discovered something about Jason, something so devastating that she considered calling off the wedding? Or had someone manipulated her into thinking she had? The stranger in the hall. Then came the twist no one expected. A hotel employee told detectives that, around midnight, a man not on the guest list had been seen near Claire's suite. He wasn't dressed like a wedding guest, and he avoided eye contact with staff. The surveillance camera caught only a blurry image of him walking down the hall. No one recognized him. He wasn't family. He wasn't in the bridal party. He wasn't staff. So who was he, and what was he doing outside the bride's door just hours before she was poisoned? The ring's silent testimony. Investigators revisited the engagement ring Claire had left behind. She never took it off, not when she worked long shifts, not when she traveled, not even when she slept. Friends said she adored it. Why, then, was it sealed inside that pouch? Some believed Claire had removed it herself as a symbolic act, her way of saying she couldn't go through with the wedding. Others believed someone else had placed it there after her death to send a chilling message. But what disturbed investigators most was the discovery of faint chemical residue on the pouch itself. The same poison found in Claire's body. That detail forced everyone to confront a terrifying possibility: either Claire knew she was being poisoned and tried to leave behind a clue, or the killer planted the evidence deliberately to send a message. The shadow of doubt. By the end of that first day, the investigation was more tangled than ever. Claire's own words accused someone of betrayal. Jason's late-night disappearance put him under a spotlight. A mysterious stranger had been near her room just hours before her death. And the engagement ring, once a symbol of love, had become a piece of evidence drenched in suspicion. Her family's grief deepened with every revelation. They hadn't just lost their daughter, they realized she may have spent her final hours in fear, carrying a truth she hadn't been able to share. If Claire Matthews was poisoned, and if she left behind a note pointing to a man she couldn't trust, then the killer wasn't a stranger at all. The killer was close. Someone trusted. Someone who had been invited to the wedding. The groom's secrets. The note, the ring, the poison, it all pointed in one terrifying direction: Jason Harper, the groom. Police didn't officially name him as a suspect, but behind the scenes, detectives were circling him like hawks. He had motive. He had opportunity. And he had no alibi for those critical hours between 2:41 a.m. and 4 a.m., when toxicologists believed the poison had taken full effect. But what investigators were about to uncover went far deeper than a groom with cold feet. Because Jason wasn't just hiding something from Claire. He was hiding an entire life she never knew existed. The missing hours. When asked where he had gone in the middle of the night, Jason's answer never changed: "I couldn't sleep. I went for a drive." But detectives wanted specifics. Where had he driven? Did he stop anywhere? Did anyone see him? Jason hesitated before finally saying he'd parked at a rest stop just outside of town. But when detectives pulled the security footage from that rest stop, Jason's car never appeared. So if he wasn't there, where was he? A financial trail. Claire's family began handing over her personal items to investigators: her phone, her journal, her laptop. They hoped it might help explain the note she left behind. Buried inside her email was something startling: a credit card alert from 3 days before the wedding. The card was in Jason's name, but Claire had access to view the statements. The charge was for nearly $4,800 at a jewelry store. That wasn't unusual. Weddings often came with expensive last-minute purchases. But Claire's journal entry the very same night painted a darker picture. "Jason lied to me again. I don't understand why he needs so much cash. He says it's for the honeymoon, but it doesn't add up. I can't stop thinking, what else is he hiding?" The ex who spoke up. The investigation widened. Detectives began talking to people from Jason's past: old friends, co-workers, and even ex-girlfriends. One woman, an ex named Lauren, reluctantly agreed to speak. And what she revealed shifted everything. "Jason can be charming," she admitted. "But he lies. A lot. He told me once he had to borrow money for work travel. I later found out he was in debt from gambling. He owed people thousands. Dangerous people. She paused, her voice lowering. I broke up with him when I realized. I didn't really know who he was at all. Her words echoed Claire's own haunting line in the note, "He's not who you think he is." The stranger returns. Meanwhile, detectives were still trying to identify the mysterious man seen outside Claire's room the night she died. The blurry footage was enhanced, and while it didn't give a clear face, it revealed enough. The man had a distinctive tattoo on his hand, a snake coiled around a dagger. A local officer recognized it immediately. It was the mark of a small but notorious underground betting ring in Virginia. And guess who was rumored to have ties to that same group? Jason Harper. Jason breaks. When confronted with this information, Jason broke down in tears. He admitted he had been struggling with debts for over a year, debts he had kept secret from Claire. But he swore he never hurt her. He claimed the stranger was likely someone following him, not her. They wanted to scare me. They probably wanted to send a message. But I never thought, God, I never thought they'd hurt Claire. The problem was, Jason's story left more questions than answers. If he had debts with dangerous people, was Claire poisoned as punishment for him? Or was Jason using that story to cover his own guilt? The note's hidden meaning. Investigators circled back to the note. The phrasing was haunting. If you're reading this, then something is wrong. The wedding can't happen. He's not who you think he is. At first glance, it sounded like Claire had written it hours before her death. But handwriting experts pointed out something unusual. The strokes were lighter, shakier than her usual confident script. Which raised two chilling possibilities. 1. Claire wrote the note in her final moments, already feeling the effects of the poison. 2. Or, even darker, someone forced her to write it. If it was the latter, then the note wasn't a warning. It was a setup. The family's fury. Claire's family, already broken with grief, grew furious at Jason. Her father called him a liar to his face. Her mother refused to even look at him. But Jason's own parents defended him fiercely. He loved her, his mother cried. Jason wouldn't do this. You're all looking at the wrong person. The tension between the two families boiled over, and what should have been a day of unity became a battlefield of blame. The deadly pattern. Detectives then uncovered one final piece of evidence that made the hair on their arms stand up. 6 months earlier, Jason had taken out a life insurance policy on Claire. The beneficiary? Jason Harper. The amount? $500,000. Jason insisted Claire knew about it, that it was standard practice since they were planning to share finances after marriage. But Claire's parents were adamant, she never told us about any policy. She never would have agreed to that. Now, the picture forming was almost too dark to believe. Had Jason planned this all along? Had he carefully constructed the perfect wedding, only to ensure it never actually happened? Or, was he telling the truth, and Claire was simply collateral damage in a debt he couldn't pay? The cliffhanger. By the end of Act 3, the evidence pointed in two terrifying directions. Either Jason poisoned Claire, hoping to collect on her insurance and escape his debts. Or someone else, tied to his secret gambling life, killed Claire as a warning to him. Either way, Claire's death wasn't random. It was deliberate. Now we'll uncover how investigators followed a trail of deception, betrayal, and danger that reached far beyond the wedding, and into a world of secrets Claire never should have been dragged into. The web of lies. The image of Claire Matthews lying lifeless on her wedding day had already torn her family apart. But by now, detectives knew they weren't investigating just a bride's death. They were pulling apart a web of secrets and lies that stretched far beyond Claire, and every new discovery painted a darker picture of the man she was about to marry. Because while Jason Harper swore he was innocent, his past, and the company he kept, was telling a very different story. The double life. On the surface, Jason was a reliable, mild-mannered fiancé. He worked at a logistics company, played in a weekend softball league, and spent holidays with Claire's family. But the deeper investigators dug, the more cracks they found. He owed over $60,000 to an underground betting ring. he had been quietly withdrawing money from a joint savings account he shared with Claire, money she thought was reserved for their first home. And his phone records showed late-night calls to numbers traced to burner phones, many linked to men with criminal records. To Claire, Jason was the love of her life. To investigators, Jason was a man living a double life, desperate to keep it hidden. The stranger identified. The breakthrough came when a tattoo artist recognized the blurry surveillance footage of the man outside Claire's room. The serpent and dagger tattoo? He'd inked it himself years ago. The man's name was Victor Kane, a known enforcer for the very gambling ring Jason owed money to. Detectives now had two explosive possibilities. 1. Jason killed Claire for financial gain. 2. Or Victor Kane killed Claire to punish Jason, or to remind him that debts must be paid. But if Victor had done it, why poison? Why not something quick and violent? Poison suggested patience, planning, intimacy. Poison wasn't Victor's style, which pushed suspicion back onto Jason. The groom cracks. Detectives pressed Jason again, this time with photos of Victor. Jason's face drained of color. He admitted Victor had been threatening him for weeks, demanding repayment. "I swear to you," Jason sobbed, "Claire didn't know the details. I kept her in the dark. She thought I was stressed about the wedding, but really I was terrified. I didn't want to drag her into this." But then came the question that mattered most: did Victor kill her? Jason shook his head violently. No. No, that doesn't make sense. If they wanted to scare me, they'd come after me, not her. Someone else did this. Someone else. But who? The maid of honor's confession. Detectives turned their attention to Claire's closest confidants. And that's when her maid of honor, Sophie Bennett, revealed something that shook the case yet again. 2 days before the wedding, Sophie said Claire had come to her in tears. She was holding her phone, trembling, unable to speak. When Sophie pressed her, Claire finally whispered, "I don't think I can marry him. There are things he hasn't told me. Big things." But when Sophie begged her to explain, Claire shut down. She said she needed to handle it herself. The fact that Claire never shared what she knew, but left behind that cryptic note, haunted Sophie. She was scared, Sophie whispered. I could feel it. But she was also determined. Like she was planning something. The poison source. Toxicology revealed the poison wasn't random, it was digitalis, a powerful chemical extracted from foxglove plants. In large doses, it stops the heart. Here's the chilling part: digitalis isn't something you can pick up at a store. It's most commonly found in cardiac medications, medications Claire would have been familiar with because of her work as a nurse. Which meant two possibilities. Claire had recognized the symptoms in herself and left behind the note as her final warning. Or someone close to her, with access to her medical knowledge, had used that same awareness against her. Either way, the killer hadn't just poisoned Claire. They'd chosen a method that ensured she would understand exactly what was happening in her final moments. The insurance policy. Investigators circled back to the life insurance policy Jason had taken out on Claire. $500,000. Beneficiary, Jason Harper. Jason's defense was shaky, it was for her protection. If something ever happened to me, she'd be safe. That's what couples do. But the problem was timing. The policy had been opened only 6 months before the wedding, the same period when Jason's debts began to spiral out of control. To Claire's parents, the motive was obvious. He killed her for money, her father spat. He never loved her. He used her. Jason denied it, but the evidence was mounting. The family rift. The investigation didn't just pit detectives against Jason, it tore the families apart. At the vigil for Claire, her parents refused to let Jason sit in the front row. Tension boiled over when Jason's mother tried to defend him, only to be shouted down by Claire's siblings. "You're protecting a murderer," her brother shouted. Jason, sobbing, cried back, "I loved her more than anything. I didn't kill her." The once joyous gathering of families had become a battlefield, each side convinced of their version of the truth. A shocking discovery. Just when detectives thought they were closing in on Jason, a shocking piece of evidence flipped the case upside down. Claire's phone, retrieved from the hotel room, contained a draft text message, never sent, but saved in her phone at 1:14 a.m., hours before her death. It read, "I know what you did. Meet me in the morning or I'll tell them everything." The message wasn't addressed to Jason. It was addressed to someone else in Claire's contact list. Someone she trusted. And that someone wasn't her fiancé. It was Sophie Bennett, her maid of honor. By the end of Act 4, suspicion had shifted again. The groom, once the obvious suspect, was now sharing the spotlight with Claire's closest friend. Because if Claire had been blackmailing Sophie, or threatening to expose her, then Sophie had every reason to silence the bride before she could walk down the aisle. And in Act 5, we'll uncover just how twisted this case really becomes, when the truth about betrayal, jealousy, and obsession finally comes to light. The best friend's secret. The draft text on Claire's phone shattered everything detectives thought they knew. It wasn't Jason she was planning to confront. It wasn't Victor Kane. It was Sophie Bennett, her maid of honor, her childhood best friend, her sister by choice. For years, Sophie had been Claire's confidant. They shared secrets, clothes, heartbreaks, and dreams. To everyone who knew them, Sophie wasn't just the maid of honor, she was practically family. The idea that Sophie could have anything to do with Claire's death seemed unthinkable. But the unsent text message was undeniable. Claire had something on Sophie. Something big enough that she threatened to expose it. And just hours later, Claire was dead. A history of envy. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered Sophie's life wasn't nearly as picture-perfect as she projected. She had dropped out of graduate school after failing her final exams. She was drowning in nearly $80,000 in debt, much of it from online shopping and credit cards. And she had recently been evicted from her apartment, quietly moving back in with her parents without telling anyone. Meanwhile, Claire was thriving. She had a good career as a nurse, a family who adored her, and she was about to marry the man Sophie once secretly admitted she had a crush on. 1. By dawn, Claire is dead. The timeline suggested Claire confronted Sophie that night. She may have discovered Sophie's involvement with Victor and threatened to expose her. Sophie's solution was as cold as it was calculated: poison Claire with digitalis, ensure Jason took the fall, and walk away as the grieving maid of honor. Victor's role. But Victor Kane wasn't the type to follow someone else's plan. Witnesses later recalled seeing him in the hotel lobby, nervously pacing, checking his phone. One bartender remembered him muttering, "If she doesn't pay, someone's gonna." Victor's role was intimidation. He wasn't supposed to kill Claire, at least, not directly. But his presence that night added an extra layer of fear and control. If Sophie had doubts, Victor silenced them. If Claire resisted, Victor was there to make sure she didn't walk out of that room alive. The final betrayal. Detectives believe the last moments of Claire Matthews's life were filled with confusion and betrayal. She wasn't just poisoned, she was confronted by the two people she least expected to turn on her. Her best friend. In the shadow of her fiancé's debts. The note she left behind: "Jason isn't who he says he is. Don't trust him." May not have been just about Jason. It may have been about the twisted world Jason's lies had unknowingly dragged her into. Sophie's collapse. When detectives laid out the evidence, her digital searches, her pharmacy past, the hallway footage, Sophie cracked. Her breakdown wasn't the sobs of a grieving friend. It was rage. She had everything. Sophie screamed in the interrogation room. "Everything I deserved. Jason was supposed to be mine. That life was supposed to be mine." And she flaunted it like it was nothing. But when pressed about Victor, Sophie clammed up. She wouldn't admit to working with him, wouldn't even say his name. Which left detectives with an even scarier question: if Sophie was obsessed enough to poison her best friend, what else was Victor capable of? Victor disappears. When police moved to arrest Victor Kane, he was gone. His apartment, emptied. His phone, disconnected. His car, abandoned on the edge of town. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Detectives were left chasing a ghost, while Sophie sat in custody, denying the murder but unable to explain away the mountain of evidence against her. And the town, once ready to celebrate a wedding, was now left grappling with the horrifying truth: the bride's death was no accident. It was the result of envy, debt, and betrayal, woven together into a plan that ended with Claire's life stolen on the day she should have had it all. But here's the darkest part. As detectives prepared their case against Sophie, a new piece of evidence surfaced that threw everything back into doubt. A hidden recording. Found on Claire's phone. A voice, angry, shaking, saying, "If you tell anyone, you'll regret it. You don't understand what he'll do." The voice wasn't Sophie's. It wasn't Victor's. It was Jason Harper's. We'll bring all the threads crashing together, revealing the final truth about who killed Claire Matthews, and why her story remains one of the most haunting wedding day mysteries ever told. The final truth. The hidden recording changed everything. For weeks, detectives believed Sophie and Victor were the masterminds behind Claire's death. Sophie's jealousy. Victor's intimidation. The pieces fit. But now, hearing Jason Harper's voice threatening Claire on the eve of their wedding forced investigators to consider a horrifying possibility: the groom, the man Claire loved and trusted most, might not have been the victim of circumstance after all. He may have been the architect of her demise. The recording. The audio was grainy, but clear enough. Jason's voice, sharp, frantic. "If you tell anyone, you'll regret it. You don't understand what he'll do." Claire's voice followed, shaking, but firm. "You're lying to me, Jason. I know you are. And tomorrow, everyone else will know too." Those were some of Claire Matthews' final words. What was it she discovered? What truth had Jason buried so deep he was willing to silence his bride-to-be forever? The real debt. Investigators pieced together the tangled threads. Jason did owe money to Victor Kane, but that wasn't the whole story. Jason's gambling wasn't casual. It was compulsive. He had burned through savings, borrowed from friends, even pawned family heirlooms. By the time of the wedding, he wasn't just in debt, he was trapped. Victor wasn't chasing him alone. Jason had ties to multiple lenders, each more dangerous than the last. If Jason didn't pay, his life was at risk. And then, like a lifeline, the insurance policy appeared. $500,000. Enough to wipe the slate clean. But only if Claire died before she had the chance to cut ties. Sophie's role. So where did Sophie fit in? Detectives believe Jason manipulated her, just as he manipulated Claire. He knew Sophie's vulnerabilities, her debts, her envy, her lingering feelings for him. He dangled the possibility of a different future, one where they could start over once things settled. Sophie, desperate and unbalanced, took the bait. She may not have poured the poison herself, but she helped Jason plan it, gaining access to the digitalis, keeping Claire calm, making sure Jason's hands looked clean. She thought Jason would choose her once Claire was gone. But Jason never intended to share the payout, or his freedom, with Sophie. To him, she was just another pawn. Victor's shadow. And Victor Kane? He was the wild card. The footage proved he was near Claire's room, but detectives concluded he wasn't the killer. He was there to scare Jason into paying. He may have even stumbled onto Sophie during the act, unknowingly linking himself to the crime. When news broke of Claire's death, Victor knew the heat would come down hard, and he vanished before police could connect the dots. To this day, Victor Kane has never been found. The arrest. Confronted with the recording, the insurance motive, and Sophie's partial confession, Jason Harper's facade finally cracked. He didn't confess outright, but his silence was damning. He slumped in his chair, head in his hands, whispering over and over, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Jason Harper was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Sophie Bennett, the maid of honor turned accomplice, was charged with conspiracy. Both pleaded not guilty. Both pointed fingers at each other. But the jury saw through them. Jason was convicted of murder. Sophie was convicted of aiding and abetting. The family's anguish. For Claire's family, the verdict was a hollow victory. The daughter they adored, the bride they had spent months celebrating, was gone forever. Her father said it best at sentencing. "You didn't just steal Claire from us. You stole the future she was supposed to have. Her wedding day. Her children. Her life. And you did it for money." The courtroom wept. Even the judge had to pause. The legacy. Today, Claire Matthews is remembered not for how she died, but for the life she lived. A nurse who dedicated herself to helping others. A daughter who lit up her family's home with laughter. A friend who, despite betrayal, gave her heart fully. Her story became a cautionary tale whispered in wedding circles and true crime podcasts, the bride who never made it to the altar. Final reflection. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the crime. It's the betrayal. Claire didn't die at the hands of a faceless stranger. She died because the people closest to her, the man she promised forever, and the friend she called a sister, saw her not as someone to protect, but as someone to use. It's a reminder that sometimes, the darkest danger isn't in the shadows outside, it's right beside us, smiling, holding our hand, waiting for us to say, "I do." If stories like Claire's shake you to your core the way they do us, hit subscribe right now. Drop a like to keep these haunting stories alive, and let us know in the comments, what do you think Claire discovered that night that sealed her fate? Because the truth is, we may never know the full story. And maybe that's what makes it so terrifying.